And your podcast.
And my podcast being in my living room because we're having these problems with the internet. So like I tried to record my other podcast today. I was like, well, I will simply do this in the bedroom, and the internet was like, absolutely not. Like I got kicked out of the studio in front of the guest. It was like professional. And so it's like everyone has to be in the living room, and I'm like, it's going great. Things are
nice.
London living, baby. So we love to hang out with 4 people in the living room at all times. It's good.
You would think you guys could afford decent internet in England, but apparently not.
We have the worst internet in Europe. You'll be unsurprised to learn.
I seem to hear that about a lot of places. I've heard that like Germany has terribly slow internet, and I'm like, what'd you guys do with all that fucking Marshall Plan money? Come on,
okay,
like,
do you
what
remember?
the fuck?
Do you remember though? That time we recorded, and I was staying at my friend's house in Suffolk. I was like out in Ipswich or something, and it took 8 million years to try to get you the upload. Well, it's like the UK has the worst internet in Europe, and apparently like Suffolk has the worst internet in the UK. So it was just like, no, you may not send an audio file, and I was just like, what the fuck is happening? And there was like, you could record it just fine, but you couldn't send it. I was just like, good Lord, But anyway, fun fact, in the 2019 election manifesto for Labour, Jeremy Corbyn was like, we're going to guarantee that everyone has like fast fiber optic broadband. And the media called it broadband communism. So anyway,
Man, I wish.
Yeah, I'm like, bitch.
Please?
So, now we're just stuck with having bad internet and, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
It's much better, I'm sure, than mild democratic socialism. I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, if you do democratic socialism, then what's next? What is next?
Someday rich people might not have quite as much money. What about my portfolio of investment properties that I definitely have, which is why my family is staying in my living room? Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say to that.
Oh, Blair's like looking up the internet speeds, and apparently the UK is 47th in the world. Who's first? Finland?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong? All right.
Hong
Okay.
Kong, Singapore, Chile, Monaco, South Korea, Denmark, Thailand, Hungary, Liechtenstein.
Chile smoking us. Damn. All right. Liechtenstein getting in there first out of Europe. Gross.
There's 4 ways.
Oh, I hate it when Liechtenstein does anything.
I don't count.
Oh, yeah, they're like, you're not real. That's just a bank.
Macau, they don't
You-
count.
Yeah. No.
You aren't real.
No.
Also, you have... It's weird how you still have a surprisingly low number of Jews in this country.
Bum, bum, bum.
Real weird.
Real odd.
Strange.
Funny
even.
that. Funny that.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, man. I guess Hong Kong makes sense.
Yeah, that is true. Like, I'm like, fine. I'm not mad about that. I'm like, fine, whatever. Yeah. This is the future we were promised, etc. So,
Yeah.
whatever. Fine. She said,
Not mad.
I'm not mad about being 47th in the world. All right.
Actually laughing.
Yeah. My life's great. I love to not be able to podcast in the bedroom. Like the only job in the UK is podcaster, ironically. So like, the fact that I can't use every room of my house to do that is a problem. So I'm gonna have to move into the Trash Future studio full time. It's no good.
Oh man, hell yeah.
Yeah, just me and the boys.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is funny, like whenever I go, like their studio's over in like my first neighborhood in London, which is now like bougie, but it always makes me laugh because like the name of the podcast is on their door. And I was like, you're all out here doxing yourselves. Like, what's going on? I don't know if it's a legal requirement if you have a business or something, but it is very funny to see like Trash Future on a door. I'm like,
The podcast shed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's just called, my living room usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell you what it's fucking not is my bedroom.
It's whatever random room in my house that just happens not to be full.
Yeah, exactly. Some people have goon caves, babe. I can't even get a signal up for a Zoom meeting. It's no good.
Can't even get a signal up for a Zoom goon. How are you gonna?
They call me the Zoom goon.
Jesus Christ!
All right, that's what we should just go. It's deteriorating rapidly.
Look,
do not continue this riff, Luke. Do not continue the Zoom goon riff. Oh God,
man.
No.
Can you imagine how many people during the lockdowns and everything and work from home have Zoom gooned while?
Oh, that's so true.
At the.
That is so true. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oof.
All right. Yeah. Let's talk about.
Let's talk about medieval history. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Let's do it. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello. I didn't even do the right cadence.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how I'm doing this accent that's in between like 3, and I can't really decide which way to go with it. My name is Luke, and I promise not to do any more voices unless a Yoda or Kermit thing comes up, in which case I can't be helped. And as always, I'm joined by Dr. Eleanor Yanniga, who may do voices from time to time. Who's to say? I
could start. I don't know. Damn. I could say multitudes. You don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. I don't. You can't ever know anyone.
I don't.
Whatever.
No.
Barely know yourself, let alone know someone else. Yeah. Hey, we're getting weird with it again today, and not in the way that we were just talking about.
Not in the Zoom good sense, okay?
Different weird. Different.
I want to stress how much not in the Zoom good sense.
There's weird, and there's weird. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, but before we get there, we got a question from one of our patrons, Ollie Kant, who says, what medieval historical figure has the most parasocial relationships among living historians? Or put it another way, who's got the biggest fandom?
God, this is such a good question. I think it might be Hildegard of Bingen. I think she's up there. People really think they're Hildegard's friends. I think that's absolutely one of them. Where she just kind of inspires devotion in this particular way. Otherwise, it's going to be I think among regular people, and the wrong sort of people, which I was about to say not medieval historians, but I'm there's a lot of the wrong sort of people among medieval historians. But I think that probably Richard the Lionheart's probably on there.
That was who I was going to say too, and I was I don't know, it's probably because I don't run in a ton of medieval history circles or even really history circles, but that seems to be a very common one. And based on everything I know, it's okay, yeah, you guys really got in for those those kids books about English kings, and you just never let it go, huh?
Well, we've all seen the Fox Robin Hood, right? Where
yes.
Richard the Lionheart solves everything, somehow.
Yeah, he's always showing up. Sean Connery shows up at the end of the Kevin Costner Robin Hood, and
Mm-hmm.
makes things right with his Scottishness.
Exactly.
his debonair Scottish, whatever we want to call it. I was also thinking like Saladin, like he had like a ton of Christian admirers back in the day, and like it seems to go on, like people like if people are naming, like Islamic rulers, from the Middle Ages, it's probably like him and Mehmed and, maybe a couple of others, but like, he seems to have a big thing, and, he seems to stick out even still in the Christian imagination to some sort, to me anyway.
I think that there's also an argument here for our boy Temujin, who has like the entire nation of Mongolia standing him as we speak. So, I mean, I don't know how many of our fine Mongolian friends there are. I suppose I can use Google to figure that out. But, he looms large. Yeah. He looms large, let's just say. 3.398 million people.
There you go, yeah.
All standing him.
Yeah, he's, obviously he's a friend of the show, so we love him. I think he gets a lot, and you get a lot of people, like, he's one of those, I think, where you get a lot of people who are like, yeah, he did a lot of bad stuff, but he's very interesting. Like, this whole story is just extremely interesting in a way that isn't like, in a way that isn't typical in the Middle Ages. And I mean, obviously it's not, because, the Mongols went from being, okay, there's some horse archers, to being like, oh, fuck, they rule everything from the Pacific to Hungary.
That's a lot.
Like,
That's, yeah.
You're just like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Well, there's that. Definitely Temujin, Justinian, huge. People love Justinian.
People do love Justinian, yeah. Yeah, and I'm like
Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Yeah, and
she gets a lot of love. Yeah,
and I'm guilty of that.
It's all good.
Even though she's a royal, or whatever.
Yeah, you got you got your people, and you can't, who knows what it is that really like makes people think that other people, people are cool, or you find them interesting or whatever. Because sometimes it's like, well, I mean, just look at Genghis Khan, and other times it's like, well, I think, I don't know.
I think maybe
I think Justinian's cool because, like, I like that mosaic of him, and that kind of sticks out in my head, and so then you just end up talking about him. So,
do you think Charlemagne is on there?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, Charlemagne would have to be
and probably like maybe the worst, like him. And like Charles Martel, like you start to get like real,
creeps like Charles Martel.
Real weird vibes for a lot of the people, because like something I've noticed, like especially in America and American history, is like you see these things like where everybody who like does this new thing, they want to think that they're the new Charlemagne. Like there was talk of that when we were doing the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, America's going to have like an empire again, empire again, and it's like, and you get stuff like that. And I mean, I think like, it's, Charlemagne wasn't like a good person by any stretch, but he did some very interesting and good things, I think. And I think he's a very interesting leader, but like, he's one of those where like, a lot of the people who talk about him, like it's real weird in like we must return, crush the lustful Turk, and and et cetera, and you're just like, all right, man. Well, I think Charlemagne's kind of cool too, but you realize his empire lasted like one generation after him, right? Like.
Because his sons were fucking idiots. We probably have to do his fail sons, like as a fail sons app.
Oh yeah, at some point true.
It occurs to me.
Yeah, because he had a lot of them. He's him and like Alexander before him. They just too big of fuck ups.
Yep.
Yeah. I think those are a lot of them, and some of them I think. Of these parasocial relationships that Ollie asked us about, I think, some of them are, good or fine. I mean, I think if you particularly have an interest in any historical person, it's, normally find. It's not like a moral blot on your character. It becomes that when you're like, oh, we need to be like Charles Martel. You're like,
no, we fucking don't.
No, yeah, or like where people are like, this medieval, religious figure. Like, we need to go back to that. Like, no, we don't. We do not need to go back to medieval religion in any way at all.
No,
none.
Although it makes me realize that
not.
I stand one medieval saint. Well, actually,
only one.
I guess I
you
stand
the dog.
I stand the dog mostly. But yeah, I guess I stand a few. But like, I stand Saint Francis of Assisi.
Yeah,
because I think it's cool as shit to be like, rich people suck. I'm hanging out with birds. I'm like, fuck yeah, like, let's fucking go. Like, bring that back.
Yeah, I do like old Francis. Always has the stigmata. I went to an art museum with my wife when we were on vacation last year, and we were walking through some medieval paintings, and there was one, and I was like, "Oh, Saint Francis of Assisi," and she's like, "How do you know that? We weren't Catholic." I was like, "Oh, it's because he has the stigmata, and they always used to paint him like that." And she's just looking at me like, well, I guess you do really learn a lot doing that.
That's true. That's
and I was
right.
like, yeah, there he goes. I think, he's cool. Like, I don't, as I've said, I don't want any, I don't want to return to like the way religion mistreated them. But like, yeah, like some of these people are like just legitimately interesting. Jan Hus, like,
that's
insane,
a good guy. Yeah.
but really cool. Like, all the proto-reformers and, all those guys, and I mean, Luther in the early modern period, interesting as hell. An evil guy.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of a genius, like an idiot savant, a genius and a moron at the same time, but
yeah,
interesting nonetheless. Yeah, so I think that's a lot of them. I think...
so this is just like people Luke and Eleanor kind of like...
Well, I mean, yeah, I think,
and also
Dante.
ones we hate.
Like, I haven't mentioned Dante, like I love Dante.
Yeah.
Great.
No, I think a lot of people,
but,
yeah. Because you can feel like you have a relationship with Dante because we know so much about him.
Yes, because you know something about his inner life. That's what's so that's what's so fascinating. Like you could like the same thing with Chaucer. Like that's why people. That's what I think that's why it sticks around because this is one of the earliest examples where you can see the like inner mind of a person because they're writing fiction or like sort of fiction stuff that's taken from real life or whatever you want to call it, but like they're writing this thing and you can get it into like how they view like the clergy and the peasants, nobles, et cetera, and it's not just like an account, a historical account that we normally get. I think that's stuff like that's
for more on that, listen to our
really
episode of 10K Posts where Luke and I expound at length about how much we love Dante.
It's true. It's true. It was fun, and Dante is great. But I think, I think these are probably like the Western ones you'll get. I'm sure in other parts of the world they're probably a lot different.
More emperors, one would imagine. This sort of thing.
Yeah. More emperors, things like that. But I think it just really depends. I think the most problematic ones are probably like the military / crusade ones where the military historians get all horned up on like reactionary shit. But I mean the rest of them, like for the most part, are fine. There's some of them that are like perplexing, like the Richard the Lionheart thing where you're like, man, I guess like,
basically,
but then you got people who are legitimately like, cool as hell. So Ollie, thank you so much for the question. We do really appreciate it. And if you want to ask us questions like this that we do that we overthink and do at the beginning of most episodes, then please do subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/WNSDpod. You get all of our regular episodes ad-free. There's as of Friday, there will be 60 bonus episodes because we are releasing our review of Dune Part 2. Later this week, so you can check that out if you want to hear what we thought about Dune specifically. and whether or not we enjoyed embracing the light of space Islam. And you get to ask questions, you get access to our Discord, all that good stuff. Check it out, subscribe, it helps us out. Patreon.com/WNSDpod, $5 a month. You know the deal. All right. On to the main show. So to start this, our 4th episode in the Weird Medieval series, we have to go back in time to follow the story of human migration. Way, way, way back in time, in fact, to Africa, some 350,000 years ago. This is the point when our earliest descendants, technically known as anatomically modern humans, diverged from the rest of the Homo erectus family tree, and humanity became an independent thing. Over the next 250,000 years or so, humanity grew in fits and starts almost exclusively on the African continent, and while some forays were made outside the landmass, they were quickly abandoned. But it's sometimes hard to move out of your parents' house, and it wasn't until about 70,000 years ago that our ancestors made a final permanent departure from our ancestral home in Africa. In doing so, we unwittingly started a 70,000-year-long journey that would see humanity settle every continent save Antarctica and every patch of habitable land on this planet. This long process was limited by the climactic and tectonic systems of Earth, which open and close access to land over vast timescales, and technological limitations, which limited the ability to travel over deep, open waters for millennia. Despite the fact that humans had made it from Morocco to northern Australia by 65,000 CE, and then all the way to the Cape of Good Hope in South America by about 16,000 CE, it wasn't until much later that our technology caught up to our ambition. Finally, around 3000 CE, explorers left the island, now known as Taiwan, and began populating the vast chains of Pacific islands, aka Polynesia, an act known as the Austronesian expansion that wouldn't be completed until these explorers settled Rapa Nui and New Zealand in the Middle Ages, circa 1200 CE. In and of itself, this is an impressive enough feat, given that Rapa Nui is something like 1,500 miles from the nearest land. But humanity wasn't really satisfied and decided we had to collectively circumnavigate the globe by sea. This, too, occurred in the Middle Ages as island-hopping Norse Vikings traversed the Atlantic before reaching the eastern coast of modern-day Canada, where they settled the short-lived colony of Vinland in the 10th century. Then, by the mid-13th century at the latest, Polynesian explorers completed the feat, successfully crossing the Pacific Ocean to South America, interacting with the locals, and making a return journey. For years, such pre-Columbian transoceanic contacts with the Americas, meaning prior to 1492, were considered fanciful nonsense or outright fabrications by most, but the tireless work of geneticists, archaeologists, and historians have since proven that both Norse and Polynesian contacts did occur. Without question, these two medieval sojourns are some of the weirdest and coolest shit to ever happen, and that's where we're starting this installment of our Weird Medieval series. Then we're going back to Africa, this time to Mali, where we will discuss the famous king Mansa Musa and the time he caused a brief economic depression on 3 separate continents by going on pilgrimage. Ooh,
king shit.
So
king shit.
Literal king shit in this case.
Yeah.
He went so hard, he went broke on the trip, but he was so generous that everybody helped him out on the way back, and he still ruled for another decade after that. Yeah, we'll talk about him in a minute. It's real cool. Look, I'm going to level with you. The stories of the medieval Atlantic and Pacific contacts with the Americas are, in my opinion, some of the greatest accomplishments in human history.
That's right.
Not just the sheer distance traveled, which is immense, but also the fact that it seems to have happened more than once, and that it left lasting material and genetic evidence for us to discover. It just kind of took a long time, until 2020, in fact, for scholars to believe and confirm the evidence, partly out of well-earned skepticism and partly out of old blind chauvinism. See, on the one hand, theories of pre-Columbian contacts with the New World have been around for at least a millennia, long before Christopher Columbus was even born. And, people are skeptical of them for good reason. Most of these theories are obviously pseudo-historical nonsense that doesn't merit a second thought. We've got everything from Americans being shipwrecked in Europe and sold into slavery under the Roman Republic, to Jewish refugees fleeing the Roman-Jewish wars and settling in present-day Tennessee, to the myth of one of the Chinese treasure voyages making its way to the west coast of America in 1421, and to one I was reminded of just this morning that Egyptian sailors and workmen came across into present-day Central America and built a bunch of pyramids for the Mayan civilization.
For God's sake.
And then went back.
Fuck me. Oh, God damn it.
So, like, you understand why people are like, yeah, that shit didn't happen, man. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of these tall tales exist, but they were largely disregarded even after the discovery of archaeological remains of the medieval Norse settlement of Vinland in eastern Canada in the 60s. Even after that confirmed the broad strokes of the 10th century Norse folklore, the Vinland sagas. This, however, was easy enough to dismiss as kind of a one-off event that was only possible due to island hopping across the North Atlantic. Surely, they reasoned in their Western chauvinism, no one could possibly have traveled the full breadth of the Atlantic or Pacific using technology from the Middle Ages. Well, they should have known better. Their own historical findings confirmed that Polynesian travelers had the ability to traverse these vast distances of the Pacific in the Middle Ages and before, given the presence of these people on isolated Rapa Nui before Captain Cook arrived there in the 1800s. But there was another piece of material evidence that was staring Western scholars in the face and has been since 1492. It should have been proof of these contacts. And it's the curious case of the sweet potato.
Hell yes.
Yeah, woo! Everybody's so excited to hear me briefly talk about sweet potatoes.
I love sweet potatoes, bro.
I do too. And because I'm from the South, I call sweet potatoes and yams the same thing. So if I do that, just know that they're technically different.
I know the Maori name for it. It's kumara.
Nice.
Yeah, like a lot of my sexually transmitted Kiwi is about to kick in this episode. Go off. It's fine.
Oh man. Interestingly, the Maori word kumara, which you mentioned, is that was one of the first instances of people thinking that trying to say that the sweet potato had come over from America because it resembles linguistically the language that's used by the Quechua and Aymara people in South America, and that was suggested, I think, in 2004 by some linguists. So you get. So that's, it's interesting that you said that because, that's one of the little pieces of evidence that had been floating around for a long time, but people didn't really take seriously. So, like, the thing about sweet potatoes is that Europeans and Africans and I guess Eastern Asians as well have long, suspected that the sweet potatoes are indigenous to Central and South America, mostly because they were basically entirely unknown to European, African, and most Asian sources until Columbus arrived in the Americas in the subsequent age of exploration. But it was curious because sweet potatoes were also discovered to have been a long-time staple of the Polynesian diet in the Middle Ages prior to European contact. So this presents a quandary because if they didn't cross the Atlantic and the vast majority of the Afro-Eurasian landmass to get there, which they apparently didn't, or if they did, all records of them ceased to exist and people were shocked by sweet potatoes when they saw them for the first time, there's really only one option left, and that's Pacific Islander contact with the Americas prior to 1492. Well, I mean, you would think so, but scholars had another extremely plausible explanation ready to go for how the sweet potato got there. Sometime in the Middle Ages, a budding sweet potato plant fell into the Pacific, somewhere off the coast of Chile, and just floated all the way to Indonesia, where it was discovered, planted, and then it spread alongside the remainder of the Austronesian expansion as a staple crop. Now, I'm not a trained scientist or even a trained historian. I'm trained in very little, actually, but I can see a few glaring holes in this explanation. Namely that the Pacific is filled with fucking salt water, and a plant floating over 4,000 miles in salt the whole time is going to have a real tough time growing after that,
Yep.
because of all the whole, salt the earth kind of thing.
They fucking grow this pickled root. Go for it,
Yeah, pretty much. But in, let me see, when was it? Excuse me. When was this landmark study? There we go. 2013 study of... studies showed that studies of the sweet potato genome showed that it was in fact indigenous to either Central America or South America. They can't place it exactly, but it's somewhere along there, either like Chile, Colombia, or maybe part of present-day Mexico. And that what they believe now happened is that at one point, a very long time ago, prior to any of the genetic evidence we're about to talk about for humans, around like 700 CE,
okay.
Polynesians brought it back from the Americas at that point, because
These guys are so bonkers, bro.
It's so insane. So, they went there, they did this, and this is how they believe that we also got the linguistic similarities between the two. This is how they believe that this happened. And the first one they think happened circa 700. There was another one that's dated to circa like 1000, so somewhere in there. But basically, like they went to, it's now believed that these Polynesian explorers and their dugout outrigger canoes made it all the way to South America, and I guess either stole these plants under cover of darkness or something, or had them and were friendly enough that they were allowed to leave, and they left and took the plants with them. And while you might kind of scoff at that at first, you might be like, well, how are they going to transport the plant the whole way? Because, I mean, the sea air is also very salty. It's going to, like, tear the plant to shreds. But the dugout canoes were made in such a way that they could be packed with all these supplies for these long voyages, including, like, chickens, pigs, various plants that the Austronesians ate and stuff. And so yeah, that's the working theory. They heard the word for that the locals in South America use for sweet potato, and they brought it all the way back to to Polynesia. But then but it's still kind of tenuous, because you're like, okay, fine, like some guys like maybe made it there. They stole a sweet potato plant, left, and okay, fine, like maybe that did happen, but there's other evidence, and this comes from genetics, and it's human genetics, because prior to 2010, we were like, there was 2010 was when we cracked the human genome. By the way, there was we were like, well, sure, people have been around for a long time, but they certainly didn't cross these oceans. Certainly didn't mate with people from other species like Neanderthals, Denisovans, etc. They didn't do anything like that. And then 2010, these studies come out, and it's like, no, we fucked Neanderthals until like 30,000 years ago.
We will fuck anything.
Yeah.
All right.
And it showed that in 2020, the study from the publication Nature confirmed that peoples on the Pacific islands of Mangareva, Marquesas, Rapa Nui, and a few others had genetic admixture from the indigenous Xenu people of modern-day Colombia that occurred toward the end of the 13th century. It was initially suggested that these contacts occurred in the Pacific Islands, but it is now believed by most scholars that they happened in South America. Okay. Now, the thing about this is that we don't know anything about that. Like, it could have been like people came ashore and they fought with the locals, and some women were raped or carried off, taken and carried off and into slavery or whatever. But it's not. That's not necessarily true, because these meetings happened, and like there aren't a ton of records, or even many at all, that say like the Austronesians wiped out like indigenous peoples or tried to do that when they landed somewhere, because they went to a ton of places that were like inhabited by people from much earlier human movements, like the people who had made it to like the Torres Strait Islands and like parts of Australia and stuff like that. But they didn't try to wipe them out or anything. So it's more or less suggested that this was just the Polynesians came ashore as they did. They found land. They maybe thought like, oh, okay, this is new land for us to settle. And then they found the locals, and they were like, oh, okay, we can't settle here. This is obviously already settled land, and it's not settled by our people, which means we probably have to turn back or whatever, because it's the farthest we're going to go. And but they had peaceful relations with the locals, to the point where they traded in, sweet potatoes, and had sex.
Why not?
Each other.
Dude, you know what? Well, after a fine sweet potato meal, how else are you gonna like cap that day off? I'll tell you how. Getting down. That's
I
how.
don't. And like if it happened peacefully, and there's not a lot of evidence. There's actually no evidence to show that it didn't. Like, that is just incredible. Like, they showed up, and these people who did it, like these languages are not like that similar.
Yeah.
But like they were able to communicate enough, and
that you could communicate that sweet potatoes are delicious, and who the fuck wants to get it. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful part of humanity.
It is. I think it's crazy. Like they're like, oh yeah, like we got here and we just wanted to, get down, and like,
doing the old
for whatever the reason they did it, maybe like for whatever reason and how it happened, like this left a lasting genetic marker in people. In people on a few islands in the Pacific, and it ties them back to like Colombia, and it's before the earliest I think is 1150, and it's just like that, and the fact that the sweet potato has been in Polynesia for longer probably indicates that it was there before that, and it's just like they made that journey, and that's fucking insane. Like, it's just like, it's fucking crazy that they made that journey all the way. And did it as early as like 700. Like, fucking incredible. They didn't even settle Hawaii until 900. Yeah, anyway, it's fucking
I just think
crazy. I think it's go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to point out to the audience that I was steadfastly trying to do the hand P and V sign at Luke, and he refused.
Sorry.
He refused to acknowledge the fact that we've got good sign language.
I'm sorry. The Zoom thing got thrown behind.
Look at it, Luke.
Yeah.
Look, I'm doing the hand sex symbol.
Yeah, sex.
That's
yeah.
Right. I have an important historical fact to interrupt with. And it's the P&V sign.
Oh man, yeah. And like, yeah, there's some other stuff. There's like billy goat weed, which is native to the Americas, but was found on Hawaii when we landed there. Likely means that it traveled there somehow with people, because it's probably too far for it to travel over the ocean. And there were two skulls that were found in Brazil that are not not Brazilian at all. They are actually from the Chad. They're from Polynesia, and so like they found these skulls, and people were like, well, you know, how the fuck did they get into like the Amazon region of Brazil? Like, because that stuff, what, you know, a lot of the Amazon hasn't been inhabited for a long time because you just can't get through it.
Yeah.
It's now this came out, I think, in like 2014, but it's now believed that these were like taken, and they were taken from other European colonial ventures in Polynesia, and they just ended up in Brazil, given the fact that there are no other traces and there's just two skulls there. If it was like genetic markers, that would probably be different, but just having the two random skulls there, you know, has led people to believe that it's maybe these things just got moved. But like, you know, that's crazy. Yeah. And you know, it's weird and wild and awesome that they did this, and also it's very likely that there's one other very likely pre-Columbian connection between Afro-Eurasia and the Americas, and that is that Japanese sailors and fishermen almost certainly blew into the Pacific Northwest, and vice versa, given the prevailing currents there and what happens to boats. Like normally there, I read something that was like it's a racing certainty or something like that this happened, even though we don't have evidence of it. So, you know, that's another one that we've got that we just haven't confirmed yet, but that's really cool.
That's why everyone in the Pacific Northwest is a weeb. I'm allowed to say it because I'm from there and I am one, so it's fine.
I did not say it, but I will laugh at it.
I'm allowed. It's true, dude.
Yeah,
we have a problem. Someone needs to do something about it. At my school, the languages they taught were French, Spanish, German, and Japanese. That was what my high school taught.
Get ready to learn Japanese, buddy.
Yeah, I bet you I have some weeb opinions. You know, I lived there. I weebed hardest. You know, I did the traditional weeb pilgrimage. You know, don't worry about that. So, you know, blow a boat off course.
Yep, blew a boat off course.
And then, you know, 1,000 years later, a girl from Tacoma's moving to Tokyo like she owns the joint. You know, this is what happens.
Yep.
You know?
And living there and doing whatever it is that...
Terrifying the locals by being tall.
Yeah. I was going to say, being really tall probably...
Yeah, sometimes children would
you to
cry.
stand out there.
Yeah, like
babies
on the train weren't into it. They didn't like it. I was
like, an ogre.
Yeah, pretty much. It was like too much. It was too much. All right.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, that was very rude of those babies. Hopefully they...
Yeah, rotten hell babies.
to learn the error of their ways. Yeah, so that's the Polynesians. I've been talking for a while. Let's move on to Vinland.
Yeah.
Eleanor, why, pray tell, did the Norse... why did they, you know, what were they looking for when they just kept settling the most inhospitable parts of the North Atlantic, from Iceland to Greenland and then just, you know, over to Newfoundland?
Well, you know, you got a couple problems with your Norse. You know, and the first one is that they will also fight each other. Mm-hmm. Isn't it? Right. So, like, you know, the big expansion into Iceland kind of comes as a result of a big consolidation of power within, you know, kind of like the Norse lands more generally. Mm-hmm. So you've got like a lot of people who are like, I'm a king. And it's like, buddy, you rule an isthmus or like, whatever. And they're like, no, I'm a fucking king. I think you'll find. Right. And it's just like when you start getting more consolidated ideas, for example, of like Norway and stuff, people are like, I got to get out of here because this guy doesn't think I'm a fucking king. Like, no.
Who the fuck is he? What is his problem?
Like, and so, you know, they jump in their boats and they find Iceland, and that's a coup. Okay. Mm-hmm. Iceland is a pretty huge coup because humans hadn't got there yet. Yeah. And it's got really, really great soil because it's got volcanic eruptions happening all the time. So it's absolutely great for farming. Because it's just like anything you put in the ground is like poof, it'll just kind of take off. So even though it's super far north and like you would think that it would be inhospitable for any number of reasons, is actually fairly all right if like what you're fixing to do is settle down and do some crops, which, you know, people kind of forget that the Norse are also pretty good farmers, and they are.
Yeah.
Right. So there is this kind of like, oh, okay, hell yeah, we're going to go there. But then, you know, fast forward a couple years, they fighting again. Like they're, you know, and they're like, I'm gonna start my own Iceland, you know, with seals and forget about literally anything else. It's just
and stave churches.
Yeah, exactly.
Something else out. Yeah,
and so they kind of end up moving over to Greenland as well. You know, so that is then kind of like. I mean, it is all basically North America. You have, you know, Inuit people who live there. And so you're already having contact between Native Americans and Vikings, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, the Inuit are making content going like back and forth, and they know where other guys live, you know, and they're kind of like moving around. And so you would guess, even though there's a really contentious relationship between like local indigenous Greenlanders and the Vikings, and they do not get on, that there's some understanding that there is kind of like a further south and there are more places. And Viking ships are interesting, right? Because they can do ocean voyages, you know, otherwise how the fuck would we get to Greenland right now? But, you know, they're best for kind of like coast hugging. Like it is, you know, like no one's trying to go too out in the middle of anything. And it's a very good opportunity to do some coast hugging, right? So they're just like, all right, well, I'm going to go down there and see who it is. And more specifically, our boy Leif Erikson is going down there. And like around the year 1000.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is kind of like a process of island hopping. Right. So it's not just like, oh, we'll just go out there and see. It's not as wild as like what the Polynesians did. Right. Which is a lot more like, I don't know, bitch, I got a couple of pigs in a canoe. Let's go. You know. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's
a different difficulty. It's a different kind of difficult voyage. It's just like it's not the 4,000 miles from Indonesia to Chile kind of thing.
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously the difficulties here are the elements being, you know, fucked up. You have to sail at particular times of year because things will get iced in, which is like, will become a very big problem for Viking Greenland at a point in time where it's like, you know, you only have certain times of year where you can get in or out of Greenland, which is an issue. But they are like, well, we'll kind of check it out. And they go from island to island and they go further south. And the idea here being that, hey, if we get further south, we also might find more hospitable territories. Because despite the name, Greenland is not really well adapted to doing Viking shit. Right? Like it is not green.
It's a barren land, a land that bears no green.
Yeah.
As the old sea shanty goes. Yeah.
It is 100% a glacier. Well, okay, not 100%, but like 90% a glacier. And it's not great for raising cattle or horses on. There are a lot of seals to eat, but seals aren't particularly fun to eat. Like it's not like, you know,
it's all fat, all blubber. You don't want to eat that.
And there is some indication that Viking Greenlanders as well kind of really resisted eating seals, possibly because they associated it with indigeneity. And so, like, for example, our middens and things that we dig up from Viking Greenland are like full of fish bones, but not seal bones. And it's like, you can starve to death eating fish, you know, because it doesn't have like enough nutrients, and like when you're that far north you kind of need to be eating blubber because it's got like vitamin C in it and stuff like that. So I don't know, Viking Greenland's a mess. Then the point which is to say that encourages you to get in a boat and check out what is further south. So they get to Vinland, which is Labrador, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. And there are some people out like in Vinland. Like you get some Vikings who go down there and they're like, oh hell yeah, brother, because it's like it's a lot better living than Greenland, I'll tell you that much. Right? But we don't really know how many, and we would use the term sparsely, right?
Yeah.
And this only really goes on for about 20 years or so, because the thing is, it is really, really far away. And at this point in time, we're already having a great breakdown kind of with the Greenland things. And you need the Greenland connection to have the Vinland connection, right?
Yeah.
But we find all kinds of Norse stuff there, right? So, like, we find, like, bits of Jasper from Iceland.
Yeah.
Right? You find Viking-style weapons and things like that. We know that they have a boat repair facility there. We know that there is an iron forge. So there are things that indicate long-term settlement and, like, the real necessities of Viking life. And now, the boat repair facility and stuff like that, this is also very important in terms of thinking about what the Vikings are doing, because one of the big issues with Greenland, if you are a boating culture, is it don't have no fucking trees, homie.
Yep.
So it's like you're relying.
You know what does have trees though? Canada.
Yeah, dude.
A whole fuckload of trees.
Oh, yeah, they got tree EEs. So they get down there and they're like, "Fuck yeah, boy, I'm about to make a boat." You know, right?
Yep.
Like, whereas in Greenland, you are pretty much reliant on driftwood for pieces of lumber large enough to make a boat. And so, like, their boats are breaking down. They're having real trouble getting through things. They're really, really reliant on people from Norway coming to check on them, being like, "Are you guys okay?" And they're like, "No, I am not okay." You know, kind of a deal. But we also know a bit about Vinland because the Vinland sagas exist.
Yes.
And the Vinland sagas are pretty cool. I mean, as are most Norse sagas, and I do always recommend people check them out. And yeah, there are a lot of like half Thor begot, full Thor begat, Snorri begat. Like, you know, you get some begatting in there, but there's a lot of monsters and sex scenes, and sometimes like people beat their stepmom up because she hit on them. It gets wild. It gets pretty Jerry Springer. So
and then occasionally they preserve a literal, kernels of truth from a literal voyage across, the Atlantic to get somewhere. And I think it's cool that that this was they came back, they told people about this, maps were drawn. Some people believed it enough to to write it down. There was a guy named Adam of Bremen who was a scholar. I think he was a clergyman, who wrote this down after learning about it from a Danish king. And there were other guys. And then in the 1200s, the Vinland sagas were actually written down for the first time. But by the end of the Middle Ages or even the early modern period, people were back to being like, that didn't really happen. You guys are full of shit. Like no thanks. There was like a history of Norway written in the 15th century, and it was like, yeah, that didn't happen. No thanks.
Yeah.
Greenland is just really big. You guys just don't know what you're talking about.
Which is an interesting one. Like, it's an interesting it's an interesting way of kind of like doing it, where they're like, these guys don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And I'm like, I feel like these guys are actually really good at oral traditions and also telling you where they sailed. Like, that is the one thing they're super good at, is communicating sailing information, which is how they got to Greenland in the fucking first place, right? Like, so it's a really funny one. But so it was always kind of in there. And again, we were like, nah, these guys are stupid and they don't know what they're talking about. But this gets confirmed in 1960. And I take it back. I said it was Labrador. It's Newfoundland. I get my doggies mixed up. Okay. I get my little doggy islands confused.
Yeah.
And we find the remains. And when I say we, I say it's a husband and wife, Ingstead archaeology team. And they find it at Leon Almedo. Like, look, dude,
hell yeah.
I'm not gonna fucking pronounce
French
Canada stuff correctly. They're like, I think that's
if they're not gonna take the trouble to like make it to make it more French, what are you?
Yeah, like, you don't give me Leon Meadows.
Yeah,
like Leon. Like, what am I meant to do with this shit? So they kind of like dig it up, and that's cool as shit, because you get the archaeological evidence we need in order to prove this. Now, it maps on to these oral traditions, though. But this is very, very similar to the same thing that we see with like the Polynesian expansion, because you know, we have these oral traditions that say, here's what we fucking did, and everyone just goes, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
You know? And it's interesting because there is this snobbery in cultures that have written mediums of communication to say that like oral ones are just completely invalid, and there's like no fucking way you could tell a story with your mouth and that the information would be correct. And when you think about it, that's just a bizarre claim.
Yeah.
Like why is like writing something down immediately like a better proof of anything, right? Because like you know, you could write down that, you know, Principal Skinner and Mrs. Krabappel were in the cupboard and they were making babies, and I saw one of the babies and the baby looked at me. And just because you write that down doesn't mean it's valid or more valid than anything else. Yes, look, we're elder millennials and I'm making Simpsons references, okay? It's just happening. Let it happen.
Yeah.
But we did that with Polynesians, and we did that as well with Vikings. So I guess at least it's nice to see people be racist towards Vikings. Like, you know, they deserve it.
Yeah, you get like we do have this tendency to just like discount any oral society as being you know, there's no way they can have memory of that or whatever. And it's like, but we've shown that there is, like, you know, the Vikings had writing, but they were telling these oral stories that got preserved orally for 200 years before they were written down. And you've got, you know, Aboriginal Australians who are, you know, who have like these old stories that date back to events from like 10 or 15,000 years ago. And people might remember a few years ago, there was this New Yorker story about how the Cascadia Fault in the Pacific Northwest of America and Canada was going to have like this huge, it was primed to have this huge eruption sometime soon, and it was going to destroy a lot of these places. And some of that, I think, has been shown to have been a little overblown. But what wasn't overblown was the way that they figured this out, was that they talked to all of these indigenous tribes that surround the Pacific Northwest and in Japan, and very northern Japan as well. I think they're called the Ainu up there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and they talked to them, and all of them had this story that happened about the same time, like 400 or 500 years in the past, about how there was this insane earthquake that, like, it was so bad that, like, parts of the land just fell down. They dropped like 10 or 15 feet or whatever, and it left these random ghost forests, which is all these dead trees, like in a swamp around much taller trees that, you know, they look to be the same age as. And turns out, like, an oral history of this real, like, catastrophic earthquake that we don't know anything about except from like these random ghost forests was like a real thing that all of these different tribes had preserved orally for hundreds of years. And it's like, you know, some of it probably, you know, is the stuff about giants, fanciful. The stuff about, you know, Hercules did this and pulled open the Strait of Gibraltar or closed it, depending on which one. Like, yeah, obviously, probably not true. But the stuff where they're like, yeah, we found these islands and they're different from Greenland, and this is what they look like, and here's a map that some guy, you know, drew by hand or whatever, and we're just like, whatever, you fucking idiots, you fucking hicks, you goddamn idiots.
But like when the Venerable Bede is just like wiling out and telling you like some stupid ass story, we're like, real shit, bro. Right?
Like, thanks, Bede. This is great. Your bullshit about how praiseworthy the British Christians of that era were, I'm sure, is 100% true.
Absolutely top notch shit. Yeah. And it's like, there is this snobbery, right? Where it's like, well, Venerable Bede wrote his bullshit down, so so he gets to get called venerable, even though he was on one the whole time. So
yeah, it's a testament to, I think, human ingenuity to be able to do this, either to be able to take outrigger canoes across the vast Pacific, or to be able to island hop and set up a place in a completely different land where, like, I mean, I think that's the only iron forge in the Americas before European colonization. Like,
legit.
That's just fucking insane. Like that, like that's crazy. And like we see these oral traditions preserved, and we see people laughing them off, and then the archaeologists come behind and they point to the sociologists, and the sociologists point to the historians. And you've got to, like, and when you put all this stuff together and you actually like do the research into what's happening, you get all this cool shit. Like one of the things I looked at for this was that in 2021, they used experimental archaeology to determine that the way that the boards were cut for the surviving longhouses and buildings that were made was by weapons that were forged and made in such a way that the local Inuit peoples, the indigenous peoples of northern Canada, didn't have at the time. And it's just like, that's cool. Fucking cool as shit that we can do that, like, yeah, maybe we should listen to these people,
Yeah, who knows?
I realize the Vikings were obviously like colonizers, not in the same way that, modern European colonizers were, but like at the same time, it's still insane that they were able to do that.
Yeah.
But then they, kind of got BTFO'd by the locals, which makes sense because, when as Eleanor said, when the Greenland settlement died out, that was pretty much the end of anything past Iceland. So yeah, okay, and before we go, we've talked about him before, but we're going to talk about this one event because it really is crazy. Mansa Musa.
Everybody's favorite.
Mansa is actually the title. He was the 9th Mansa of the Malian Empire. Musa is the Islamic word for Moses. So yeah, his name is Moses. And he's also going to go through the wilderness on a big trek. So yeah, he was the emperor of the Malian Empire from 1312 to 1337. And being a devout Muslim, as he was, he decided that in 1324 he was going to go on pilgrimage. But, Eleanor, what's the thing that everyone, even the backward Europeans, knew about Mansa Musa at the time?
He's got gold.
Woo, gold.
Woo. Okay,
woo.
So
this MF is Prester John.
Woo.
Or whatever.
Yeah, well, yeah, like, so we did that episode about the Catalan Atlas where I was just let's talk about maths. Yeah, like, so my boy's on the Catalan Atlas.
Yeah.
Where they're like, this is where Mali is, bitch, and it's just like him on a throne holding a piece of gold, like wearing a big gold crown, and hilariously he also has like a fleur-de-lis scepter because it's like, yeah, sure, why not?
Oh yeah.
But so they've got like hella gold. And basically they have like a pretty good like gold panning regions that are a bit to the south, but they also make a good bunch of money off of taxing the salt trade.
Yeah. In
like North Africa and across there. So it's like if you want to get salt through, and everybody wants to get salt through because salt rules, you've got to pay them off. So we also think that, like, probably the ivory slave is in there, or like, they've got spices, they've got all that good stuff, right? So they've got a ton of money. And so because they've got a ton of money and Mansa Musa wants to go on Hajj, and quite right too, he's like, all right, well, part of what I'm going to be doing when I go is I'm about to like give gold out, son. Like I am being pious. I am just going to like everybody I see. It's like, yeah, hey, the Malian Empire, remember it? Yeah. Have some gold, right?
And it's it is interesting because Arabic writers and scholars who talk about him, even the ones who weren't part of the Malian Empire, so they might not have a reason to lie about him, were like, he's just generous. He gives away his money like a lot and everything like that, and so this is kind of in keeping with his character, and it's also going to come back to save his ass at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's like on the way over, he like spends a bunch of time in Cairo because wouldn't any rich guy, right? Mm-hmm. So he's just like, and he's handing out the cash. Like he's handing out the cash. He also like goes around kind of like checking out the bits of his kingdom. Like, he gets Timbuktu amalgamated into his territory, which, like, real coup, absolutely get Timbuktu in there. Again, they have a lot of gold,
the library, the fancy library city of Timbuktu. I'm not kidding. It really was like a science hub of that time.
Yeah, basically. And, one of the things he's kind of doing as he goes through is he's like, hey, I'm Mansa Musa. Do you want some gold? Have you heard about Timbuktu? To everyone. And so he's kind of like gathering scholars, and they're like, shit, I don't know, maybe, damn, like, and so this is one of the things he's doing. But what he also does as a result of his incredible generousness is he depresses the price of gold, like, in the entire rest of the Muslim world. So everyone has gold, right?
He had such a command because so much of the gold that was supplied to Europe and Asia, or East Asia at least, and Africa, came from North Africa, and the Malian Empire at the time had such a huge hold on it. When he gave out all this gold, it cratered the price.
Oh, yeah.
All throughout Europe, all throughout Africa and Eastern Asia. And like, this is believed to be like the only time that someone had enough of a control over the known world's gold supply that they could do that. And he just, cratered it out for a few years by mistake, because he was just trying to be like, hey, here's some gold dust. Here you go. Here you go. To like everyone he saw, trying to raise up the peasants. And it was like, you know, they were like, buddy, fuck. I mean, like, the idea is that he took 80 camels. The gold was just taken on 80 camels, and they held like 250 to 300 pounds of gold dust each, like just insane amounts of gold, and he just gave it away. And as we know now, if you flood the market like that, it's going to depress the price greatly.
It turns out it was not great for the line. But it's a cool thing to do. It's like, I'm on Hajj. If I see a poor person, I'm going to give them gold, right? And so it's a really interesting one, because it is a really early example of what market fluctuations can be in lieu of a market, right? There's no such thing as a market, but you can still make things less important if there's a lot of it. So it's an interesting one, right? It's kind of like, for example, part of why the diamond cartels do what they do, right? Because it's like there's actually tons of diamonds, but they just like won't put them out on the market, because then diamonds wouldn't be worth anything. Yeah. So it's like it's stuff like that, and we kind of learned about it as a result of Mansa Musa, right? So here he is. Here's his 60,000 guys wearing silk brocade. Like, all right, fucking strip alert, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, well, now it's time to go back. And, like, everyone is, like, dying, right?
Yeah.
So it's like...
the return trip is just, like, the worst time anyone's ever had. There's fighting amongst the pilgrims. They start dying of everything. They get raided several times. Mansa Musa tried desperately to rebuy a lot of the gold up, because he realized the error of his ways, but it didn't really work, and that contributed to him basically losing all his money that he had on the trip. And by the time they got back to Cairo, he was
broke.
He'd gone from the richest guy in the world to
some guy,
just another regular schmo who didn't have any fucking money. But I mean, it got so bad that they had to resell stuff that they purchased. They had to sell off camels and things like that. And he went into debt to a bunch of merchants. But
he gets saved.
A local leader named Al Nasir Muhammad saw what he had done earlier and was like, "Hey, this guy tried to help us out. He tried to help the poor people out and everything." So they basically gave him enough money and safe conduct to get back to Mali. And he got back there. And when he got back to all of his stuff, he suddenly had money again, because that's kind of how it worked. But it's just like, this guy's one of the richest people to ever live. That's hard to estimate, but he's one of the richest people to ever. And during this trip, he became just another random poor person. But because he had been kind of cool, somebody took pity on him and sent him back to Mali, where he stayed in power for another more than a decade before dying. So it's like, it's just this insane story of someone who, you might think was going to get thrown down, but nope, he's cool.
Yep.
He's just
cool guy.
He's back.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Mansa Musa. Yeah. And that taught us about supply side economics and handing out gold dust and why it's good to help people, or one of the reasons, because sometimes it does come back to you, and it did for good old Moses.
Love that guy.
Yeah, but that I think is going to do it for us today. I think next time we do weird stuff, it might be time to check in on China and all of their crazy inventions, because we do love talking about that, and we've got some more stuff like that coming up. But Eleanor, what's going on with you?
Oh, I just got back from holiday, so not a whole lot. But yeah, you can check out the blog going-medieval.com. Hoping to get something up for you lovelies soon. You can find me on the socials at Going Medieval. I don't know, if you want more of my bullshit, you can check out Gone Medieval, where I'm very serious and don't say fuck all the time. So that's what's up. Yeah.
Yeah. You can find me normal places. Luke is amazing. You can find my old show, People's History of the Old Republic, wherever you listen to this. Don't forget to check out me and Eleanor. We were on Masters of Our Own Domain, talking about Seinfeld recently. And last week, we were on 10K Post to talk about our good friend Dante, one of the original posters.
That's right.
So, everyone, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.